Hey everyone, I got new art supplies to play with. Whee! Okay, so they're not new. They're new to me, sorta. I have one Prismacolor Colorase pencil already, the blue one, but I wanted other colors to help make my sketchbook more colorful. So I'm going to be sketching with each of these and share my thoughts on them. As for these, I saw they were erasers made like pencils, and that just seems to make so much sense to me, but I never see anyone use them, and I'm just really curious. Like, I want to know how they sharpen once they need sharpening, how long do the points last, how well do they erase? All that and more on today's episode. I don't actually know if this is going to be an episode of anything. I'm caught between wanting to draw a bunch of portraits for each color or animals based on each color. So I'm going to do a bit of both. But first, swatches. When these came in the mail, they were open already? Like, I opened the bubble mailer and inside was the packaging, and the bottom was, like, the flap was completely, like, open and the pencils had started falling out. Thankfully, none of them broke in transit, but I just want to know why these weren't taped if they're supposed to be brand new. Like, aren't packages like these, like, taped at the top and the bottom so, like, it doesn't open? Oh well, I'm not gonna think too hard about it. This yellow is barely visible even to me, so I know it's definitely not showing up on camera that well with how I have it set up, which means I'm probably not going to be using this one in the sketches, at least not in the main part of any of the sketches. But see, it's really difficult to see on white paper. Maybe I'll have to try it on black or tan paper or something. Some of these colors that I swatched were definitely harder than others to get to show up, especially the terracotta color and the light blue. The terracotta is just like a super light brownish orange, pretty much the exact color of a terracotta pot, so at least the name's accurate, but it's even lighter than the light blue. The black pencil I'm not going to use because it's basically like using a regular pencil, maybe just a little darker, and I bought these for construction underneath sketches and for pops of color, so obviously the black pencil isn't going to be of much help. I started with the brown pencil, and the first idea that came to mind were bears, so the rest of this page was devoted to doodling a bunch of bears in various sketching stages. When I get to the last two sketches, I did look at reference images from the movie Brother Bear, because I wanted to try more cartoonish bears without it looking like a teddy bear, necessarily. For me, there's just no in-between, I guess, which is why references are nice. I can see where I'm missing details, or where I'm putting in too many details, which is something I struggle with stylistically. The first two I did without reference, going by just my knowledge of how quadrupedal animal joints work. They look more like toys than actual bears. Whereas once I started the third sketch with a reference image of Coda? Is his name Coda? The little boy bear in the movie? Anyway, you can tell that I've started to pay more attention to where certain details are, like the ears and the eyes and such. My issue with style and animals is that I can't seem to get the anthropomorphic traits right, so it took a little bit. It didn't exactly come out looking like him at first, but that's the nice thing about these pencils is that I can add more lines and thicken where I'm not sure if the lines are correct, because there are a lot of lines in some areas, and it gives the illusion that the sketch is more correct than if I had just used one line. At least that's how I see it. That's what sketching is for anyway, building up the correct lines, because they're in there somewhere. The last bear sketch was of Kenai, the main character, who has this really goofy face to me, so I thought he would be good practice. I tend to draw animals in a very serious manner, which is another reason why I was trying to go a little bit more in the cartoonish direction. I wanted to lighten up the mood, you know? And he had his mouth slightly open, which is something I feel like I'm really bad at drawing. The perspective of the teeth and tongue tripped me up for some reason. Eventually, I got to a point where I realized I made a few too many lines when sketching around his eye, so I decided it was time to bust out these eraser pencils. Time to see how these bad boys work. See how I haven't opened these yet? I've had these supplies for like a week now, and I haven't used them until today. I have been so patient. So these better be worth it. Also, please ignore my struggling. It was way more difficult to open than it looked like, I swear. One thing I forgot to mention about these pencils is that even though they're erasable, they're still colored pencils, and thus don't really erase that well unless you're super light with pressure when you're drawing. The erasers that are on the pencils work like a little better, but it is still something to note about these pencils. I know at some point I tested the eraser pencils on regular graphite and it worked fine. So it's not that these eraser pencils are trash, they're not. I think they work pretty well, honestly. Because it is an eraser material though, the points are pretty easy to bend and like smoosh down. It just requires some finesse. And despite the colored pencils not erasing that well, I'm fine with that. I knew that they didn't erase well since I already have a blue one that I got in an art box. I just like using them for sketching and for use under or on top of like watercolor or markers. It's less harsh than graphite or fine liners if you want that sort of look. The next color I used was the one labeled Tuscan Red, which is a nice wine red. Makes sense. I couldn't immediately picture an animal in my mind, so I started with some feminine portraits with different expressions. I don't think the first two came out that well though. The first one was at a weird angle and the second, I kinda like the second one. The hair and top half of the face at least. I kept messing up on the mouth and eventually caved and moved on to another face. This one came out marginally better. The angle was more comfortable and I had a much easier time with the mouth. The eyes came out a little big and I tried to correct that as best I could, but I knew spending all day trying to make it perfect was going to drive me insane, so I moved on from that one too. If you can hear my cat purring, I'm sorry. She wants attention. For the last little sketch, I did a pair of cherries with simple shading to make myself feel a little better about how the page was turning out. Cherries are just one of those fruits that teachers have you learn to draw so that you can work on like shading and shapes, so they're almost second nature to me by this point. At least that's how it was for me. I'm sure other teachers started with like jars or apples or pears or other still life staples. The next page was the terracotta color. If I'm being honest, I sort of wished I had skipped this color. It was super light and had a different texture when drawing with it compared to the others. I don't know why, but it felt more scratchy than the others. And I couldn't think of much to draw other than literal terracotta pots. I did end up sketching my own character down at the bottom. You'll meet her later because I plan on doing a video on her exclusively, but that's down the road. For now, you can barely see the pretty botched bust sketch. I have a better sketch of her further back in the sketchbook that I'll show off sometime, but not today because we have more pencils to get through. The carmine red marker that's on the cover of the packaging was next, and this time I went straight for portraits, but I did some side profiles this time. I tried to simplify them a bit more because I always have a hard time with the nose and lips, but I'm not sure how well that worked. I know I messed up the hair on the first sketch. Too many lines. The second sketch I kept even simpler, especially with the nose and the hair, and I think it came out alright. Very far on the cartoonish style scale, but I like it. But I was getting sick of drawing people again, so I moved on to drawing a parrot. The red reminded me of the classic scarlet macaw, and I thought it'd be fun to draw, since I don't really draw birds that often. I did look at a reference image, of course, because I don't trust myself to draw a bird accurately at all. I do like how the bird came out. I think he looks nice and majestic, and yeah, 10 out of 10 would draw again. As one last sketch on the page, in fact, I did a simpler, smaller version of the parrot right next to it so that I could hopefully commit the shapes into muscle memory and be able to draw it again. The vermilion marker was next. Not marker, pencil. I thought vermilion was a redder color than this, since it appears far more orange actually, but I'll take it because at first I was concerned that there wasn't going to be an orange in the set. Orange is my favorite color and I was looking forward to drawing, well, foxes, as you can probably see. I worked differently here and started with a simpler design before working on a slightly more realistic model. I did also add some brown to the first guy to see how he'd look, and he looked adorable, obviously. What else would he be? As you can see, I switched back to an earlier page in my sketchbook where I had sketched foxes, and I tried to copy one of my earlier sketches once again to try and recall the muscle memory I used to have when drawing them. This was the more realistic fox that I drew jumping, which I did because I think they look really elegant when jumping. At least until, you know, they go to land and get stuck in like the snow or something. Have you seen those videos of Arctic foxes jumping into snow piles to hunt? It's adorable and looks really elegant until they just bloop into the snow. Then it's just funny. The angle of the jump could have been drawn more sharply, but otherwise I'm happy with it. In the last sketch, I went back to simple and then just went even simpler, almost like a folk art kind of style. I want to explore that sort of style more because it's easier to make patterns with them, and I want to make more patterns. On the next page, I doodled a little sun in the corner so that I could say that I used the yellow one, but otherwise it's the light green page, where I drew frogs. Lots of frogs. I started with Tiana's frog form from Disney's Princess and the Frog, since I seem to have an easier time starting simpler and working my way up in terms of details and styles. I don't really think it looks like her in the end, though. Next, I tried to draw the frog shapes from memory and worked my way up. I guess the silhouettes look enough like frogs that I could get away with calling them frogs, but I was getting frustrated because they didn't really look that great either, so I went and looked up a reference instead, which helped a lot. Go figure. The eyes bug out a lot more than I initially thought, so that was the first detail I started with. And then I noticed the legs sit sort of differently, at least for this type of frog. Obviously, not all frogs look the same, but on this frog, the legs were different. They were further down, and the front legs had like more joints and shapes to them than I originally thought. I don't know what I originally thought. I don't really look at frogs that often. Didn't have that many to look at this year, unfortunately. I'm pretty proud of this froggy dude, though. I attempted the head of a frog one more time, also more realistic. I put him right underneath the sun so that he could feel nice and warm. Dark green time. Instead of doing other reptilians, I decided to switch back to portraits, but this time I tried to draw masculine faces. I have a hard time drawing faces that aren't soft. Not that masculine faces can't be soft, because the second one I draw is definitely softer, but I wanted to start at one extreme and work my way back. So I started with a sharp, angular face and was almost immediately terrified. It might have helped if I had drawn it a bit bigger, but I was already too scared to do that and kept working on it as it was. And it actually came out okay. I can open up to that page now and still say that, so I'll count it as a success. Now this next guy had a happier expression and a softer jawline, but I realized after starting the jaw that the wider the chin, the more masculine the face appears, which was good to know. As for the rest of the face, I kinda just wung it and hoped for the best. I also drew some leaves in the corner because I wanted to fill the space, but didn't want to work on anything too complex. The next and last pencil was the light blue because I already have and use the regular blue one, and with this one I decided to keep the sketches fairly simple. I started with a cartoony whale and got more detailed as I drew more of them. I only know how to draw one type of whale though, but I'd rather be able to draw one type of whale really well. I should experiment with others at some point, but that's for future Heather to do. Also, apologies if you can't see the sketches that well. They call it light blue for a reason. Who would have thought? Okay, so I'm still working on the blue pencil right now, but I just realized I never used the purple pencil in the video. There's a purple, but it was hiding in the box because it got caught on the lip, and I thought I was done. I am so sorry. I'll use the purple in other videos as my sketching pencil, but as a by the way, it does work great. It's a little light, but not too bad. Anyway, these are the pages I filled in today's video. I had a lot of fun with some of them, especially the animals, and I really should draw them more often. As for my thoughts on these pencils, I like them a lot. I'm a person that likes the sketching stage, so these are right up my alley. The eraser pencils are cool, and I think they're useful, but I don't think it's a necessity. I'm definitely gifting one of them to my sister. It feels like these could last a while, so I don't think I need to. I hope you had fun watching today's video, and look forward to Tuesday's video, where I'll be relearning how to use watercolors, hopefully the correct way. So have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.